Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to get to be here with you all today. And thanks to the Newport Beach Church for putting this together. It's a beautiful thing. I want to talk together today about inspiration, its role and its value in our life, and how it's helped me. Mary Carey says, consciousness of truth rests us more than hours of repose in unconsciousness. And I remember hearing that for the first time some years back and how deeply it resonated for me. And what I hear in this is this, that being inspired, feeling inspired, rests us so much more than sleep does. Inspiration rests us. And I love this. Inspiration is so important to me and to all of us, and I think about it. Think about this. You can be exhausted and worn out and just wanting to check out and do nothing. But yet right in the middle of that feeling, someone can offer you to do something you love or something that excites you, or someone's in need and you realize you can help, and boom, instantly you're able to wake up early and get going and feel just fine. So what's the difference? How is it possible for the same physical body and the same, small m mind that is telling us that we're spent to suddenly feel awake and alert and rested? Let's think about that and think about how we can harness this switch that energizes us, how we can harness that and invite it into our experience. So a few years back, I was working on this idea of feeling inspired, as I often do, and I was looking to feel inspired and to feel excited in what I was doing, despite what felt like a lot of things that were trying hard to be in the way, and a lot of things that were noisy and distracting. I was at first hoping that things would just change, that the things that were causing the seemingly deep challenge that would just disappear. But then this thought came. Allow anything to lift you and nothing to keep you down. I love this, and I've kept it in my thought regularly over the years. What a complete change of thought it brings. It isn't saying, wait until things change and you can be happy. It isn't giving you a list of things that will make you happy. It's instead saying that we get to choose. Take the things that are around us all the time, and allow those things to lift us. And on the other side of this, yes, there are always going to be things that will try to take our joy. But boy, don't give up those joyful things. Don't give this power. Mrs. Eddy says that she places strong demands on love. And I feel the same about inspiration. I think we get to demand to feel inspired. We're not demanding that of God, of course, but demanding it of ourselves, to feel what is already and always around us. We don't have to make inspiration land for us. We get to allow it to land. Now, I love stories. I love stories of healing. I love inspiration like that. I love these things that feel inspiring and things that dissolve human limitations and things that even flip human understanding and human reasoning on its head. And I want to share a few of those stories of healing with you here that have been meaningful to me. Things that I turn to when things are tough or challenging or when I'm tempted to be uninspired. A few years back, I was on a rescue call, and there was this group of climbers who had gotten off route and lost up in the mountains, and they are what's called cliffed out, meaning they weren't able to go up the mountain and they weren't able to go down because both directions were too steep and too risky to climb. We didn't know exactly where they were, but we had a pretty good idea where we might start looking, and we were grateful to be able to find them pretty quickly. The challenge was that they were in a really tough spot. And we were told on the radio beforehand that there were 2 of them. It turned out there were 9 of them. And I had taken helmets and harnesses for 2, but I wasn't prepared for so many more. But God was prepared. So, long story short, we used a rope to set up a series of safety lines to let them down climb part of the steep mountain. And eventually we got to a section that was vertical. It was maybe 150 feet tall or so and far too steep to down climb. So we set up a rope that would allow us to rappel down using our harnesses, to rappel down using the rope to hold us. On top of that cliff, there's a very steep little section of rock and a lot of loose rocks on top of them. And I was going to rappel down individually with each person and then climb back up and rappel with the next person. And I saw these rocks, and I told the men that were there to sit down very carefully and please don't move so as not to knock the rocks down on top of us. And they sat down. I tied in with one man, the first man, to start the rappel together. And he was right against my shoulder and up against my hip. We were side by side like that. And we got down maybe 100 feet or so on a large rock, maybe the size of a loaf of bread. It came down and it hit him right in the back of the neck, right on top of the spine. And he just collapsed. He crumpled and started screaming. Now, he was a career Marine, 20 plus years in, and he was a pretty tough guy. So when he started screaming, it really scared me. It frightened me. And my first thought was, oh no. And I was not proud of that response, but it was all that I could think of. And then I caught that fear and was open to it when God corrected it. I turned to the man and I yelled at him. I said, "You are okay. All is well." I said it very forcefully too. He straightened up and he looked at me in clearly deep surprise and he said, "You're right." And it was such a switch. It went from terror and a certain and horrific outcome to a complete calm and peace and freedom. God spoke directly to him. That was very evident, and it was powerful. I could tell that it was confusing for him, what had just happened. He had a human understanding from a lifetime of human experience and human knowledge of what had just happened. A big rock falling at terminal velocity hit him in the seemingly most vulnerable spot on his body, and it hurt terribly. And then it was as if it never happened. All was well. He was clearly trying to understand and was grappling with this in his thought, and it was pretty cool to see. What made it possible was his willingness to hear that inspiration that was being sent his way in the form of a shout that all was well in the midst of what seemed like something that could end what he knew of life and could even end his life. But instead, he chose to hear it, and it was very inspiring. He didn't argue, but instead listened and accepted and chose a much better path. We completed the rappel, and then I went back up to the top to get the next guy. And it took some time to get them down that section and the next several sections of steep terrain and the final rappel. And finally, I went down to the last section of the trail and hiked out the mile or two to where the cars were parked. And at this point, it had been hours since this experience with the man and the rock. But he was down there waiting for me. It was evident that he felt no pain and was in no discomfort. He was clearly wanting to understand what had happened. He was clearly choosing to feel inspired to not just explain away the beauty of this experience. He sought me out, again, this tough, confident, career U.S. Marine, and it was clear he wanted to know what happened, what he had just felt and saw and experienced. I don't remember the whole conversation. It was brief because there was a lot of commotion in emergency vehicles and his buddies were wanting to leave, but I remember him asking me, he said, "What was that?" And all I could think to say was, "Well, you know what that was. It was God." It may not have been the best answer, and it was a little more direct than I normally would be, but it's what came to me. His answer showed that he got what was being said. And he said, "Yeah, I do know." And then he left. I never heard from him again, and I wish I had, but I have to know that God spoke to him that day in the most beautiful and significant way possible, and that it's enough, and that he gets to have the full impact, no pun intended, from that experience, and gets to feel all the connection and understanding and inspiration. And he gets to feel that for the rest of his life, anytime he needs inspiration. I was on a run last week. I was wanting to be present in the beauty of the day. It was up in the mountains on the Continental Divide Trail here in Colorado. And it was just one of those days where the fall was in perfect harmony. The aspens were turning, and the sun was still above the peaks, but just barely. It felt like late summer was just hanging on. The air was a tiny bit crisp, so, well, for you guys in Southern California, it was like midwinter. The shadows on the valley floor were long, making everything look bigger and grander. It was a day you could live in forever. Anyway, I was feeling distracted. I was feeling distracted despite this immense beauty. I was distracted by a decision that I'd been working on together with my colleagues for some time. It was a decision that we felt confident we had made many months before, but then things kind of came back up in thought as deserving more listening and directed thought. On this run, I was wanting to feel some direct guidance like, "James, this is what you should do." But the answer didn't come that way. It didn't come in a direct solution. Instead, it was a direct and clear reminder of what inspiration and guidance really can be. And it was this line from a hymn that likely most of us know and have sung before countless times. It says, I will listen for thy voice, lest my footsteps stray. I will follow and rejoice all the rugged way. And then the next line, thou wilt bind the stubborn will. I was like, yep, got it. I hear you. Anyway, what inspiration. How inspiring. It was not a direct answer. Now, we love those too. We love those angel messages, and we love following them. The ones that tell us in a moment to do this, and this is the way. But this one wasn't a direct answer, but instead a promise and some real direction of how to go. Listen, James, and if you listen, you will hear. And when you hear, follow that direction. Then the important reminder of what will try to get in the way. Stubborn will. I started to remember that a decision is easy. So you just choose one, you go with it, and then you either stick with that decision you made, bad or good, or you make a decision and adjust as needed. It's all pretty human. But this is better. It was reminding me to listen and to only listen. And so in listening, I get to avoid the footstep that takes us in the wrong direction, the wrong way. It may be rugged along this way, but we get to rejoice as we go. How much better? So where does that leave us? Where does that leave us with the decision we're trying to make? It leaves the decision entirely up to God. Scary? Maybe, but it's only scary if I try to take it out of God's hands and stop trusting her, and instead put it in the human realm, where decisions are subject to every level of uncertainty and human mistakes. I will listen for thy voice, lest my footsteps stray. I will follow and rejoice all the rugged way. It was a week or so later, so just a few days ago, that the direction came. It came in feeling peaceful, with what felt to be the natural answer. No big clap of thunder, no whirlwind, no fire, just the still small voice. And peace. And if direction comes to go a different way, well, we'll do it. But direction always comes. We just need to listen for it and follow it and rejoice. The other day, a good friend quoted a lecture given by someone many of you know quite well. Lorna Ingerson was talking about her dear dad, and he told her one time that he wouldn't pick out a tie without asking God first. Think of that. Think of the living that humbly and that completely in touch and in sweet communion with God. Well, we all can do that. Inspiration is all around us. The only thing that blocks this constant inspiration, well, it's us. It's our doubts, our fears, our ego. But we get to look right past those and to let those doubts and fears dissolve with the constant beauty and joy. And even if we feel so unhappy, so disconnected from joy, from peace, from beauty, even then, we have complete and constant access through the joy, the peace, the beauty of others. Let their joys lift you. Let the beauty of the simplest thing lift you. Let the silliest thing make you laugh, even when it might be so tempting not to laugh. Let the fact that peace exists somewhere help you. We know this is true. We know that enjoying and supporting the good of others is tremendous. It's like magic. Someone's laugh or a smile feels so powerful. Allow anything to lift you and nothing to keep you down. I have another story for you. I hope it's okay. I had an experience some years back that was deeply meaningful to me. We received a call that a young woman, 20 years old, had fallen. She was up on a very technical ridge high up in the mountains, around 13,500 feet, and she was injured and unable to get down. It was getting late in the evening, and it was late spring, so there was a lot of snow still up high, and the nights were very cold. We met at the rescue building and were able to get up to the mountains by a helicopter. But in order to fly that high, they needed to take just about everything out of the helicopter to make it lighter, including even the flight nurse and the paramedic and the oxygen tanks and the headsets and everything. And they were only able to fly us up one at a time, one person at a time. And on the flight up, the pilot was asking me questions about how I might get to her and that sort of thing. And I asked him over the headset about his career. And he'd been a combat pilot, a helicopter pilot in Vietnam. He was an incredible man with an incredible story and not an ounce of ego. He was interested only in that woman on the ridge and doing all he could to help her. The winds were high, and he tried over and over to land me where I had asked him to land, but he was unable to. He kept having to abort it and fly off the backside, just take a nosedive down the backside of the mountain and come around and try again. So eventually he had to land me at a spot maybe a mile and a half away from where we were hoping to land. The winds even at that new spot were bad enough that we agreed that I would jump the last 5 feet out because he didn't think he could touch down safely. So he took off to go back down and pick up my friend and fellow rescuer, and I was able to run and meet them at a much closer landing spot as they arrived back on the ridge. But before he took off, the pilot told me, he said, "I'll do everything I possibly can to be here when you get her off that ridge." And that was a big deal to me. He said that. And it meant a lot how deeply you could tell he felt about the situation. And it meant a lot to me to know that he would do all he could to be there when we got down. As he left, the winds died. It just also went from being really windy and really aggressive to very calm. And it got very dark. And with the quiet, we could hear the woman scream. And it was haunting. She screamed and cried in pain and out of fear. And she didn't stop for close to 2 hours it took us to get to her. The climbing was long and very challenging, and we knew we needed to climb up to her rather than rappel down to her because we were concerned we would knock rocks down on her. As we climbed, my buddy dropped an important piece of gear that we were carrying and that we would need. Fortunately, that piece of gear stopped a couple 100 feet down on a small, sharp piece of rock. So he down climbed to get it, and I continued on up the steep snow and onto the much steeper rock face. And I can remember so clearly just being terrified. I kept thinking, I want to be absolutely anywhere but here. The darkness and the hard and scary climbing with no rope, but mostly it was her cries and her pleas to help her and her repeated question of, "Why won't you help me? Why won't you help me?" And it just crushed me. I asked God out of desperation for help, for anything that would quiet my thought. And I'm sure I asked God to let me not have to do this. I tried so hard to hold to anything and thought it would be helpful. And what came was another hymn. It was the last line of one of Mrs. Eddy's Mother's Evening Prayer, one of her poems. And it said, "And Mother finds her home and heavenly rest." And I clung to that like a life preserver. And all night I would turn to it. I said it over and over in my thought, and I would say it out loud. And I wanted so badly to feel that we could get this dear young woman back to her mom. The last section of climbing was overhanging, and we got past that and were able to get to her. And my piece came that final section of climbing. It was hard climbing, so it wasn't that things got less scary or that she was just fine, but instead that piece came in the middle of all the noise, and I was deeply grateful. Now, we've been told that she had fallen 10 feet onto a big rock ledge. What was actually the case is that she fell well over 120 vertical feet directly onto a small, angling, uneven ledge that was maybe the size of a dinner table. When we got to her, she was wedged from her fall between the wall at her back and a big triangular sharp rock. Her leg was pinned behind her back, and it had been pinned that way for the past 6 hours as she waited. She could move nothing except for her right hand from her wrist to her fingers. Everything else was paralyzed. Now this part was cool. She hiked a lot alone. And she always had her phone with her, but she always carried it in her backpack and always had her phone, which was an old flip phone. But this time was different. As she left that morning, her dad asked her to take his iPhone, which she hadn't done before, ever. And she agreed. And her dad's iPhone had a flashlight on it that she had used to signal us as we flew overhead, looking for her over and over. And this phone had much better reception. This time, she put her phone in her sports bra rather than in her backpack as she had always done before, because she was listening. She did as she was inspired to do. All that she could move was her hand, so she reached into her shirt and got her phone. And the first few hours after she fell, there was no reception. But then there was, and she was able to call us. And she spent the next several hours through pain and fear talking to one of our team members back at the rescue bay. and he stayed with her all night as she struggled and questioned. And as she passed out and regained consciousness, he hung on and she hung on. It was beautiful. He was adamant that we would not leave her alone and that we were on our way. And I just love that image of him caring for her throughout the night, of him praying for her, as he told me later that he did, and of so many holding her dearly in thought. Certainly, she didn't know about all the people holding her and praying for her, and likely felt the opposite. It likely felt like she was completely alone, so much that she kept yelling in desperation, "Why won't you help me?" Yet people were helping her. They were praying and loving her and were unwilling to give up despite the picture. God was with her every single moment, and that was clear. God inspired her dad to give her his phone. God inspired her to agree. God inspired her to carry it in somewhere that she could reach it. God inspired our teammate to talk to her all night and what to say. God inspired us to find her and to get to her. God inspired that dear pilot to care so deeply and to risk what he risked to get us on that ridge. God inspired the teams of people who hiked all night to come up the mountain to help carry her down in the very likely case that the helicopter was directed to leave before it could pick her up. Now, back to the ledge. She was in a lot of pain, but by now had stopped screaming as loudly and was in and out of consciousness. We talked lovingly and directly to her, and it took us over an hour to prepare kind of a makeshift stretcher that would hold her and allow us to get her. And it took us even more time to get her unstuck from that spot and packaged up and onto that improvised stretcher or litter. And she told us she would certainly scream when we moved her, but we had to just keep going and do what we needed to do. And finally we had her in the litter, in that stretcher, and we built an anchor in the rock that would hold her and my buddy. And so my buddy attached himself to the stretcher, the litter there, and I was able to lower him down, the two of them, about 200 overhanging feet of rock onto a steep snow slope below. And then I rappelled down the snow. And the next hour or so was spent working her down the steep snow slope. Human errors were present, certainly. Like I brought the wrong crampons with me, and they didn't fit my boots at all, so I didn't have those for the snow. But love was leading, and love solved each seemingly big problem. Love met need after need after need. All night long, I kept praying that the helicopter would be there when we arrived. The helicopter team had an agreement with their company, as they always did, that if they had a call at any point, that they would have to leave and go to do that call in a different part of the state. And this type of thing happened often. They'd get us up, but then they'd get called away to leave, and we would have to carry the patient all the way down. It didn't seem possible that she would live through the night if we had to carry her the miles and miles down the valley. It was clear that her injuries were extensive. She had a lot of claims going on. Broken elbow, broken shoulder, broken neck, broken back, crushed pelvis. She was paralyzed, and she was what they call broken in half, meaning her upper body and her lower body were separate from one another. What I realized during that night was that this hymn, this line from the hymn that I'd been holding to so tightly, it wasn't a promise from God that we could get her back to her mom. It was God telling me that she was already home with her actual mother and that she was at rest, despite the ugliness of the human picture. After an hour of down climbing and lowering, once we were on that snow slope, we could see the helicopter sitting dark, parked in the low-angle snowfield below. And when I finally saw it, I just started crying. These folks had spent the night waiting for her and came out and packaged her on the helicopter. She was unconscious, but you don't need to be conscious to feel love. They flew her to Denver, and we started a long walk back down to the valley floor. And when we heard from the hospital where she was admitted in Denver, they gave us this big, ugly laundry list of issues she had, and they told her that she would be in the hospital at least 6 months and that she likely wouldn't walk again. And she walked out of that hospital 6 days later under her own power. Inspiration can come anytime, long before we need it. It can come right when we need it. It can come anytime, and in so many ways. And it can be with us, and us not even realize it. And then, it's there. Jesus said, "My yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Jesus said this. If Jesus could feel this way, despite the persecution and the uncertainty and the seeming responsibility that he carried, how can I possibly feel heavy? How can I feel discouraged? How can I decide that there's too much going on for me? Mrs. Eddy said, we're all capable of more than we do. Again, that's Mrs. Eddy. She discovered Christian Science. She started a church. She taught others to heal. She had her own practice. She started the periodicals, the Journal, the Sentinel. She started the highly respected Christian Science Monitor. She wrote Science and Health and so many more published works on CS. She oversaw the building of the Mother Church and so much more. And she said, we. What? I love this. It's so inspiring. I don't believe that she said this as a critique or to chastise us, but instead to free us. How amazing that the people that seem to have the most going on in their lives, the largest and most seemingly crushing loads in life, said that those burdens, those loads are light, that we, she included, are capable of more. I love this. Who doesn't want to feel more capable? Who doesn't want to feel that the yokes we carry are easy? So, I get to either read right over those passages, or I get to be part of this. I can argue against myself and argue that these things don't include me, that I'm excluded from this good and from this capacity. Or I get to argue on the side I want to win. And part of our responsibility in this whole inspiration deal is this. We must accept inspiration. Not argue against it, not fight against it, not explain it away. We must accept it. We must not give away our inspiration by deciding and stating that things are too hard or too tough or too much or too old or too young, or that we're too busy, or that challenges are too great. Instead, we can decide that our burdens are light. Ye shall find rest. Work, good and loving work, those replenish us. Life is not rest and avoidance. It is action. And thank God it is. Mind rests in action. Love gives us rest. Serving others gives us energy and makes life's burdens light. So, what's the opposite of inspiration? What kills inspiration? I think it's self. I know when I put myself at the center, when I focus on me and what I think I need, boy, is that exhausting. It's deflating. It's defeating. It's discouraging. So how might we fix this? How might we get inspired and keep it rather than killing it? Well, whenever we feel uninspired or deflated, we always have the answer. It's love. It's loving others. Countless examples of this exist, of people who've had very challenging situations in lives who, rather than giving up or giving in or quitting or turning bitter, instead they made grand and noble lives of their struggles. Maya Angelou, Nelson Mandela, Mrs. Eddy, and so many more. They lived and thought and cared about others and were lights to so many. So when we turn our love and our attention outward rather than inward, when we seek to understand others and seek to love more than we seek being loved, our burdens become light. Our yokes are easy. We find ourselves capable, free, inspired, and inspiring. A dear friend used to repeat this statement, less of me and more of thee. Now, of course, the thee in the statement is God. And the key is that less of me and my opinions and my will, less of that allows me to feel more of God. So, find these people in your life and in your reading and studies who inspire you, who open doors of thought to bigger and more expansive things, who show us what is possible, or at least the very beginning edges of what is possible. And allow this to just take hold in your thought. Find inspiration in landscape, in beauty, in music, in sports, in art, in a story, in being grateful, in people, and in their generosity, and hearing someone laugh. And never let that inspiration go. Hold fast to it. Hold fast that which is good. Turn to it. Decide that anything can inspire you. Allow anything to lift you. And allow this kind of inspiration to be just as natural as breathing. Thank you.